Welcome to another episode of Educating Homebuyers, the podcast. I'm your host, Brady Hay, and my mortgage team has over 9 years of mortgage experience here in Des Moines, Iowa. Whether you're buying your first home, upgrading, investing, or simply just curious about the market, this show is all about helping you and future homebuyers feel informed, educated, and comfortable as you take your next step. Each week, I sit down with real estate professionals, past clients, and local experts to unpack real stories, real advice, and what you actually need to know when buying a home today. Without further ado, let's get into today's episode. Today's guest is a founder of the Avanti Group, an independent insurance agency focused on serving real estate agents, mortgage lenders, and their insurance clients across the Midwest. Avanti Group specializes in both commercial insurance and complex personal risk, supporting homebuyers, investors, and business owners with a process-driven focus, advisor-first approach. The firm, since its founding, has focused consistently on a referral-based operation designed to scale organically without sacrificing the service it is rooted in. While today's episode isn't necessarily about mortgages or insurance at all, we really hope that today's content that we will cover, real estate agents that are listening and are here locally will walk away inspired and feel challenged to grow their businesses intentionally into 2026 using systems and insights that we'll be discussing today. Rich Bales, welcome to Educating Homebuyers.
All right, happy to be here.
How are you, my friend?
Do it. I'm good.
So let's kind of dive in first and foremost, like we normally do in a podcast episode, but give everybody an inside look into how you made your transition into insurance, and really even if you want to start prior to that in your past life too, and how that's kind of kicked off your career.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess a quick overview of just my upbringing. So I'm an Iowa boy through and through. Grew up in Pella. Went off to Iowa State. Ran track for 4 years and decided someday I was going to get into insurance. So I decided to get a kinesiology pre-medicine degree with a Spanish minor and a psychology minor. So naturally that led me to kind of the stepping stone job for insurance. I got into medical device sales for 9 years, guiding orthopedic surgeons on how to use implants in surgery and stuff like that, which really gave me a good head start for this career. So at that point, I had started dabbling with real estate investing, things like that, had gotten married along the way, had a kid, and what as a young man was an awesome job, traveling, seeing the world, doing that stuff, started to wear on me. And I realized, I want to have control of my schedule, my time, how I operate, who I work with, stuff like that. And so my wife and I just had a conversation and decided hey, we're going to make a change. We're young enough, we can do it. So I started kicking the tires on things. I thought about, hey, if I'm going to do this real estate investing thing, maybe become a real estate agent, right? But ultimately decided that wasn't for me, was pushed to be a financial advisor, didn't trust myself with my own money, let alone somebody else's. So that was also not for me. But there was one thing within that business that made a ton of sense to me, and it was just the way that those businesses are built, with renewal income and kind of this residual thing, which that's how I thought about real estate too, right? It's this residual income. So somebody in that industry then said hey, you should explore insurance. And naturally my reaction was man, everybody in insurance sucks. That sounds terrible, right? But I said, okay, I'll at least give it a chance. And I took a ton of interviews with big corporate companies. And, my entire professional career had been working for a $15 billion company. It was giving reports about what your next report would be about, and then having a meeting about when you're going to schedule the next meeting, and just so much fluff that I hated, that ultimately I just decided I can't work under a big corporate career. And then I discovered this independent thing, right? Where I was hey, you've got access to all these markets. You can sell whatever you want. There's no quotas. There's nothing like that. And I said, you know what? I think I could probably figure that out.
Today's presenting sponsor is 515 Exteriors. Your home's exterior is the first line of defense and one of the biggest value drivers. 515 Exteriors specializes in roofing, siding, gutters, and storm restoration. Their team is known for honest assessments, quality workmanship, and clear communication throughout the project. Whether you're dealing with storm damage or planning an exterior upgrade, they help homeowners project and enhance their investment. If you want an exterior contractor that you can trust, 515 Exteriors is a great place to start. I think another important detail too is that you changed markets and locations entirely. Yes, you're from the Des Moines area.
Yeah.
But you and your wife had rooted your lives in Omaha, and amidst this transition, not only did you leave medical device sales, but you also relocated back to Des Moines and moved your family here too. So you were starting fresh.
Yeah, it was I think every person when they're young has that like itch to go be your own person for a while. And I think Omaha was that for us, where it was like, we completely separated from friends and family and went off, built our careers, built our, it was great for our marriage even, right? It was like just not having anybody else other than each other to lean on was awesome. But then July was born and we needed someone to lean on. So yeah, it was when we made the decision, ironically enough, it was like our third weekend in a row driving back and forth from Des Moines. And I was so frustrated and I just threw it out there. I was like, should we just move here? And without hesitation, Jacqueline said yes. Yeah. And 6 months later, we were living in Des Moines. So, so I mean, it was a crazy time of transition. Obviously, selling a house, moving our kids, leaving our entire network we had built, totally changing careers and starting from scratch in an industry where, it's fully relationship based.
Which I think just ties in so perfectly to what we're going to talk about today is like, how do you build from the ground up a relationship based business, right? So kind of talk about those early stages. What did that look like day zero? All right, I'm finally licensed insurance. You obviously learned the craft of how to originate an insurance product and all of the compliance stuff that goes along with that, got your licenses, etc. But talk about like, what was your first initial process and like, all right, I'm here, now what? Because you didn't have anything to lean on there.
Yeah. For sure. And I think, all the guys on my team in this room can attest to the fact that learning the product is the easy part, right? Anybody can do that. The hard part is now how do I go out and create value beyond a product? Because as you all know, you can throw a rock and hit an insurance agent in a market, right? So if you show up and you're, hey, I'm a day one insurance agent, now you're really behind the 8-ball, right? So for me, all I wanted to do is I wanted to go out and I wanted to meet with as many people as I possibly could, regardless of industry, and just figure out, why are you successful? And I didn't need to talk about insurance products or speed or whatever. Like that stuff was there and it was going to come. But in that first year it was almost 400 coffees. Real estate agents, mortgage lenders, CPAs, financial advisors, business owners, whatever it was. And I figured if I could take away one thing from each of these people and implement it into what I do every day, I'm going to become pretty dangerous. And unknowingly, as I was doing that, I think one of the things that really helped me is I didn't show up to this meeting with the attitude of I'm the most important person in the room, right? I showed up and wanted to learn from them, compliment what they were doing, and just get better from it. And I think that really differentiated a lot of those early meetings that I had, because no longer was I showing up and going, hey, Brady, I'll give you the fastest quote, the cheapest quote, whatever. I wanted to talk about something deeper, and I wanted to figure out how do we actually grow together and build something sustainable. And, now I kind of make a joke of it when I meet with people. It's like, hey, I'm not going to talk to you about price or speed, but I bet every other meeting you have with an insurance agent is going to touch on that. And then inevitably people will get back to me like, oh my God, I just met with somebody and that's exactly what they talked about, right? So that time was so formative for me because I was figuring out what makes me different, right? And I think that's something I've challenged actually a lot of people in this room with is, you have to figure out what it is that actually makes you different. And it's a hard question to answer when you're put on the spot, right? And the most common answers we'll see are, well, I have a lot of experience in the industry, okay? Well, experience isn't like a linear thing. There are people who have been in industries for 20 years that have not improved for 20 years. There are people who have been in an industry for 3 years and have obsessed over it and become substantially better in those 3 years. So it can't just be your experience. It can't be saying that you care more. Those are the basic answers that anybody can throw up. But unless you have something that's concrete that somebody can appreciate, wow, that's genuinely different, then, you don't have a whole lot to stand on. So I'd say that was kind of my takeaway throughout that time.
And I think it's also important to root yourself in things you can control, right? Like you talked about price and cost and speed. Like, yes, you can control how quickly you get back on a quote, but you can't control the price of the quote that you're giving them, right? And I think that relates to mortgage and real estate as well, is like, you can't control the market. You can't control the products that necessarily that we're selling as much as, yes, you can choose the company you work for and the prices you set and things like that. You have to identify what are things you're going to provide that's different than your competition and things that you can control, right?
Yep.
I want to have you touch on, because I have to imagine, and we have a wide variety of experience level in the room here, from people that have been doing real estate for a long time to brand new agents. But regardless of how long you've been doing this, I have to imagine the concept of doing 400 coffees in 365 days is probably pretty intimidating. How many people are going to be willing to do that? How did you, first off, accept that you were going to do that? And B, how did you handle execution on that with also maintaining your home life with your wife and kids?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think, it'd be really easy for me to sit up here and give you like the PC answer of like, life is all about balance and I only work 8 hours a day and that worked out awesome and it was really fun. But like the reality is in the beginning, like sometimes you just have to have, we call them Walter Payton days. You're going to have to go run the hills. And that was the reality of it. And, I'm somebody where if I make a promise to myself, I'm going to stick to it. And so I locked in that every day I was going to have 1 or 2 coffees. And until I had those meetings booked, I wasn't going home. And, I think sometimes that pain is the thing that will motivate you to accelerate faster and do more. So for me, it was just a deal I had made with myself where I said, there's just no way that this doesn't happen. And, I'll do whatever it takes to do that. But the other thing for the people with kids in the room, one thing that someone told me along the way that really helped me and I think was pretty wise was, it's like, I think the stat is like until kids are like 11 years old, they can't perceive time. Right? So when you look back at your childhood, you don't think back to the day where you sat with your mom and dad for 6 hours in the living room and watched TV and played with toys. You remember those really intentional 1 hour segments where nobody had phones and you went out and ran around the woods and played fairies, whatever it was, right?
You're playing fairies?
Yeah. Dude, I got 2 little girls. If you don't think I'm in the woods playing fairies with them, you got it twisted. They love playing fairies in the woods. But that really helped for me realize like, okay, now in these busy seasons, I come home, phone goes on airplane mode when I walk in the door, hang with the kids, get the kids to bed, and then, spend time with my wife. And then reality is, go back to work. But those short times when you're intentional are perceived no differently than the really casual long times, right? So I think, that was my balance.
Talk through, how did you track your initial meeting consultations you set up, who you were reaching out to? What was your like guided, what were you searching for out of those meetings? And I know you said you'd meet with anybody for that matter, but I'd be curious to hear what was your target market, and then also answer that from a tone of how the agents that are listening to this could use that in their own lives, right?
Yeah, 100%. So I think, this is like a 2-part answer. So at the time, I was pretty scattered, and that was part of the thing that led me ultimately to implementing the program that I do today, right? Because it was like, man, I have met so many people, and at that stage, my whole thing was I just want everybody to know who I am and what I do. And I felt like that was enough. But what became challenging was like, man, I met all these people I really like. I'm like, how do I intentionally connect with them and stay in front of them, or whatever? But I think that'll be something that we'll want to dive into. Like ultimately that became a shortcoming for me, was that there was so much volume that without organization, it became super challenging to maintain it.
Yeah. Do you want to start diving into that, or do you have anything else? I guess?
I mean, the other thing you just kind of asked is like what I was looking for. And I think that has held true today as well. At that stage a little bit more, it was like, I needed money to keep the lights on, right? Like I was starting from zero. So like, obviously I was looking for deals at that stage. But the thing I was also looking for was I want to be surrounded by the right people that are on the same trajectory as me. I believe that if you're in a room with other A players that are all on this upwards trajectory, you're all gonna go together, right? But if all of a sudden, you spend time in a room where everybody's doom and gloom and has a reason why it's not working out and this and that, that can be a toxic thing that's gonna slow you down. So I was looking for people just with the right mindsets, and whether or not they were busy was okay. I just wanted to have those people that were gonna, lift me up as I went and understand as I went through the struggles and the evolutions of my business that could support me. So
let's start by giving maybe an inside look into what a first time meeting looks like. So what questions do you ask? What does that look like when you go and meet with somebody for the first time? Whether it's somebody you know, maybe you don't know, you can take both approaches if you want, but I think that'd be valuable for them to know, like, when I go schedule a coffee with somebody, what am I asking other than just like, how are you, right? Because I do think you want to be intentional with that time, right? You don't want to just go up and show up. So
yeah, I mean, I will say this now, like one of the best skills I learned throughout that 400 coffees was the ability to discern. And I think in the first 10 minutes, I know whether this is going to be a 15-minute coffee or whether this is going to be an hour-long coffee. So I think protecting your time is also a skill set to walk into these meetings is know. Like if this person's not somebody you're connect with, it's okay to know that and move on, right? But the other lens that I think is really important you go into any meeting looking through is there's one thing that every person in your world when you meet with them is going to be thinking, and it's what's in it for me. Right? And if you don't know that, you're naive because that's just the reality of the world we live in, right? So, I want to figure out, one, if it's the first time we've ever met, I just want to know who are you, right? Like tell me about how you operate, how you ended up where you are, whatever. But then two, the entire time I am looking through that conversation, figuring out how can I add value, whether it's an introduction to somebody in my circle. And, I say it all the time, but like my network is the most valuable thing about me. The people I know, the people I can connect other people with, that is the most valuable thing that I have. And so, if there's any way in a conversation I can identify a need for somebody, I'm trying to find that, right? And that gives me a thing to follow up with. And then you can never get rid of the fact like human connection is super important, right? Like friends buy from friends work with friends. If people trust you, like you, whatever it is, ultimately, then they're going to buy with you, right? So I would say those things.
Here at Key Mortgage Group, we believe the mortgage process should feel clear, strategic, and human, not confusing or transactional. Our focus is on educating buyers, setting expectations up front, and keeping clients informed every step of the way. Whether you're buying your first home, upgrading, or reviewing refinance options, our goal is to help you feel confident with the decisions you're making and support you with your long-term financial picture. If you want a lender who prioritizes trust and communication, Key Mortgage Group is here to help. I think one of the key things that I've taken and learned from you as well is we all say we want to be a relationship-based business, right? And that's the way that we grow. But I think that you've done a really, really good job of being true in those relationships and not just saying that the relationship exists. Yep. You have some intentionality behind the things that you retain and the information you retain. And maybe that's just a skill of yours that you're really talented at. I don't know. But I think that's important too to touch on if you're open to it, is like going to that coffee and checking that box is not what you're doing. You're being intentional and you hope that those people actually feel that you want to be in their lives, right?
Yeah. I mean, I will say this, it's a developed skill, right? Like I was not great at it when I started, but I learned quickly that like I can have 400 coffees, but if all of a sudden I only start working with 5% of these people, like that was a lot of wasted time, right? So that's when I started figuring out like, okay, I have to dial in a system around this. This can't just be this hodgepodge coffee party. I don't even like coffee that much, so how do I make the most of this? And those were some of the things that started getting me on the path of I need to get a coach.
Yeah. How far into your career was that and this coaching thing? What was your first exposure to that?
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, you obviously hear about coaches all the time. Social media feeds it to you. It knows you're, a realtor, an insurance agent, mortgage guy, whatever. So I had been kicking the can. I'd probably interviewed 5 or 6 coaches over the course of 6 months. And at that time, there were only insurance coaches, right? So people were in my industry doing whatever. And I know there's a lot of people in this room that have coaches, right? Real estate coaches, mortgage coaches, whatever it is. But as I did that, and even, there's even coaches within organizations now that are like specific to your organization. But as I was going through these interviews, the things I realized was like, it wasn't a knowledge deficit, right? Like I didn't need to know more about insurance to do better at my job. It was more of a me deficit in my skill set and how to structure my business and all these things. So the stars kind of aligned. A friend of mine in Iowa City owns a big construction company. One day out of the blue made an introduction to a business coach, which I'll give him a shout out, Joe Blackburn. Has changed my life, but made an introduction and said, hey, have a 10-minute phone call with this guy and we'll see what happens. And this is like kind of an embarrassing story for me to tell, but so this phone call with him happens at, I bet it was like 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning on a work day. And I went into that meeting with like a perception of what coaching would cost. And I had this conversation. He's got all these different tiers of coaching. And so I'm like, I'm brand new to coaching. I probably just do your most basic tier, figure it out, whatever. But essentially he told me, he's like, if you're going to do that, I don't even want you to sign up because you won't get anything out of it. It'll be bad for my reputation. Just don't do it. Right. And so he's like, if you're going to do it, whether it's now or later, like this tier of it is, and I'll tell you, it was 5 times as much as I was planning on spending. And it sent me into an absolute spiral in my own head. It was that like imposter syndrome feeling where there were like 3 ways that this could go. Either A, I would say no, and I gave him every excuse. I'm like, well, I got to talk to my wife, I don't know if she'll want me to do it. And she was like, it's your deal. You'd figure it out. Right. And then like, well, I'm awful busy. I don't know if I should have a coach, but I had like worked through that. And then finally I was like, okay, either A, I'm going to be the guy who sits on the sidelines my entire life. And someday I'll be an old man and be like, man, I wish I would have went after it and tried to do something great. Right. Or B, I'm going to be the guy who takes this big financial leap and wrecks my family. Or C, I'm going to be the guy who takes a leap and knocks it out of the park. Right. And it took me an entire day in my head. I didn't get anything done. I sat in this office and was like, which guy am I? And all day just thought about it, worried about it, stressed about it, thought about how I'd be judged, if I told people that I was doing this and whatever. And then luckily, slept on it and woke up the next morning and it's like, let's go. So I did it. And in hindsight, one of the best decisions I've ever made.
I think a good important point too, because everybody, I think in my opinion, and I've even learned this over the years of having different forms of mentorship from different people that I look up to, and I've dabbled in the coaching space, have not dove in as deep as you did, but I think another key important point is that everybody receives coaching differently and they need different formats of it. So based on your personality, coaching can be received differently. So for example, I'm somebody who like, if somebody is hard-nosed and like bite faces each, like I've had a boss at my previous company that would send 4 a.m. texts like, be a shark, like, no offense, but that's not me. Like that does not match my personality.
I'm going to start doing that.
But there are certain people that coach that way, right? And they're like, you got to be up at 3 a.m. And like, that's not going to be received as well for certain people as maybe that's what some people need, right? I would imagine, John, you're probably a guy who loves to get that like hard-nosed coaching, right? Like you need that. Well, okay. But I think that even, I would argue that like you and I even would accept different coaching methods in different ways. So my point is behind that and bringing that up is like, I don't want the point of Rich saying that like, hey, coaching is something that can be fantastic, to mean that you all have to go hire the same coach. It's not the same as like interview different formats of what coaching can look like. And it doesn't mean even necessarily hiring a coach. It can be as simple as having a right mentor that's doing those things too,
Yeah. I mean, I think you need to know what are you trying to get out of it, right? And like, who are you? Where are you going? I think when you're brand new to an industry, like many to one coaching is great just because you're just trying to learn the stuff, right? Like I need to know how to talk, how to walk, how to do deals, whatever it is. But then I do think there is a point in time, when all of a sudden, if you're, a top 10, top 20% person in your industry and you want to take that next step, that you will plateau when it's just based on knowledge, right? And so that was the point where I was like, it wasn't that I wasn't doing well, but I knew it wasn't sustainable or scalable to operate in the way that I was. And that was why I felt like I needed a coach, somebody who had been there, done that. And I also recognized that if I hired an insurance coach, they were going to tell me to do things the exact same way that every other insurance agent is doing it. And that's not what I was looking for, right? Like there's so much industry bias when you hire somebody who's in the same industry as you that I think a lot of stuff gets left on the table that you could learn elsewhere. So the coach that I use is a general business coach. And it was all about, it was a lot of mindset stuff, which some people like, some people don't, but it fixed a ton of things for me when it came to imposter syndrome and what's possible and what I could do. And then also I was in a room with other people running other types of companies, and it's crazy. One day you'll be talking to a guy that runs a flooring store. The next day, a guy owns 2,000 apartment units, and then another guy's training dangerous dogs for the Navy SEALs, right? And he looks at my insurance business and goes, hey, why don't you do it this way? And I'm, it's like, well, yeah, I guess nobody else does it, but I should do that, right? So I think you need to recognize where you're going, where your deficit is, and what you want out of it before you hire somebody. But I'll also tell you that the top 1% in about every industry has a coach. So there comes a point in time where if you want to level up, I think it's a really good idea.
I think an important thing to talk about too, and I'd be curious to hear your opinion on this, but I think everybody probably has different priorities and goals of where they want to take their businesses to. Mm-hmm. So how would you advise somebody if they're sitting in this room today and like a top 5, 10, 1% producer is their goal? How is that different from somebody who's just content helping their friends and family? And like, how do you navigate the two spectrums of that, right? Because there's a wide variety and not everybody's goals are the same. Not everybody wants to be a top 1%er. Mm-hmm. Speak on that if you're open to it, on like, how do you decide that day zero on how do you want to scale your business?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think if you're day zero, like you just have to go after it to start. Like it is what it is. You need the money, whatever. Unless you are somebody who is like later in life, has money and is just doing it for a hobby, then just have fun with it, right? Like you're at that point where like you're established, just go have fun with it. But if you're young and you're trying to figure that out, maybe someday it's balance, right? Like, you know, for myself, I can say like someday I hope by noon I can do what I want with who I want when I want anytime, right? But that's not today. And I recognize that. So I think when you're young enough in a career, like you got to pay the bills. So get to work, get better, network, do it how you want, right? Like you don't have to do it like I do it. You and I operate differently, but we still get along and do good business. So yeah, I mean, I think that's just a self-awareness thing.
So now speak on that from the perspective of, okay, I've been doing this for 15 or 20 years. How do I pivot?
100%.
If I don't have these things implemented already.
Yep, 100%. I mean, I think it's a personal decision, right? Like at the end of the day, you wake up every day and you decide what you do. So, you know, I joked with Brady. I think there's some things here today that if any of you take them and implement them over the next 365 days consistently, I guarantee you're going to get better. But ultimately, the way these go is you're all going to have a folder and it's going to have some things for you to take home and do. But 10% of people are going to do it.
I joked with Rich, we need to put lids on the garbage cans in here because you're not allowed to throw your take-home folders away. We want the stuff that's in there to be valuable for you guys and implement it. There is some homework pieces that we'll touch on here after a bit, just to, again, help get better, right?
Yeah, and I mean, but that's like the reality of anything is like everything works, but nothing works, right? Consistency is the biggest thing. So if you commit to something, commit to it, stick to it, whatever. I've got my thing that I think works, and I know we'll dive into that here, but yeah.
Today's podcast is sponsored to you by Avanti Group Insurance. Insurance is one of the most important pieces of the homeownership puzzle, and Avanti Group is known for making it simple, transparent, and tailored to each client. They specialize in home, auto, and umbrella coverage and work closely with lenders to ensure policies are structured correctly from day one. Their team focuses on education, not pressure, so clients understand exactly what they're covered for and why. If you're looking for an insurance partner you can trust, Avanti Group is a great choice. I think we're at a good point to start talking about this system itself. So pillars is what we're going to talk about, and it's funny because there's no E or A or O. A. There's no A in it, but let's give everybody an inside look. So this pillar system is something that was implemented to you or introduced to you from your coaching experience. Let's dive into this system itself. What is it? What does it stand for? And what does that look like for you from day zero to today?
Yeah, for sure. So kind of transitioning from our early topic about, hey, I had these 400 coffees. I recognized that some of these were like one and dones, didn't talk to them later. And ultimately, like, that was me not looking through the lens of them thinking what's in it for me, right? So I wasn't providing enough value to create a relationship. And I was doing things at so much volume that a lot of this stuff was falling through the cracks. So that was one of the first things when I got into coaching that he identified. He's like, hey, you know, what's the saying? It's like, what's measured can be managed and what's managed can be improved. And this huge cornerstone of my business, you know, networking, if you want to call it that, I wasn't measuring or managing or doing anything with. It made me feel good that I had all these meetings, but like if it didn't turn into dollars, what was the point? So that's when he introduced pillars to me. And so what pillars is it is a relationship management strategy to actually systematize relationships and make sure you are continuing to deepen and build relationships in a documented way, right? So what pillars stands for, the P in pillars is people who pay you ideally. So this isn't just because you get paid from this person, it is your ideal client paying you ideally. Then they introduce you to other people when you ask them for introductions. They like you, you like them. They listen to your advice. They think you're that expert. And then they send you unsolicited referrals. They're willing to be out there banging that drum for you in your profession. And you will also know there is no A, and that's because there are no assholes in pillars. So, and I'll tell you, like, that is one of the most freeing things you can implement into your life is like, it doesn't matter how much money you can make with somebody or, you know, how good they are at what they do. If they're an asshole, cut them out. It'll give you a lot of peace. And I live by that now, and it's been huge for me. So
I wanted to make a joke so bad. And that ends today's podcast, Rich. It's time for you to leave.
No assholes. Gotta go. Yeah. So within pillars, you know, I have all of this documented out where I've taken the time to identify, all the different types of relationship categories within this. So that's the next thing we'll dive into. So pillars, that person is the core of the entire thing. These are the people that will make you the most money, grow your business. Like I said, they meet all of those things that we just talked about. So if somebody checks all those boxes, they are then a pillar, and you need to prioritize contact with them, right? So I've got notes on last time we met, last time we talked, what did we talk about? Where can I add value? Stuff like that. And this is all in a living, breathing spreadsheet, right? So I understand, and it's not just guesswork on how do I continue to add value to this person, their business, their life, whatever it is. The next one you see on there is prospects. This is something that probably lives within your CRM. These are people in the next 30, 60, 90 days that are going to be buying from you, right? So depending on the industry, you know, we always talk about time kills deals, so we need to be on top of our follow-up with this. This is just the general hygiene of your business. So that one speaks for itself. Connections, these are people you think you know, right? So if you scrolled through your phone, you've probably got 2,000 people, and these are not people that need to be sold to, but they're people that need to understand who you are and what you do, right? So you want to have them on social media, you want to be bumping into them at events, just make sure they understand who you are, where you're going, what you do, right? But the key to that is these people don't need to be sold to. That nobody wants to pick up the phone. I was joking with somebody at dinner last night. Nobody wants to answer the phone and have somebody call and be like, hey, so you thinking about selling your house? That's not like the lead, right? There needs to be this warm conversation that's already happened, and then hopefully they bring that to you, right? Influencers, these guys are probably the second most important people in your world compared to pillars. So influencers are all people who benefit from the same clients as you financially, right? So in your world, that can be financial advisors, that can be builders, that can be owners of companies that have access to a ton of people. That can be mortgage lenders, insurance agents, you name it. We all benefit financially from the same clients. So we treat these people the exact same way as we treat our pillars. I have it documented when I'm touching base, what I'm talking about, how I can add value, what they need, where they're going, all of that stuff. And then the last one is big hitters. These are much more few and far between. So these are people who you know, but they don't know you. They have massive networks. They're super connected. So I think everybody can think of like that one person, like, man, if that guy thought I was his go-to guy, it would change my career, right? They're much more few and far between, but a lot of times your influencers, your connection, things like that are your way to get introduced to them. So like the hygiene of this entire thing is you've got this massive network of people, but you probably don't have them identified of like where they make sense in your world. And you don't have a plan on how do we grow with them? How do we implement value to them? And ultimately, how does this turn into more deals, referrals, you name it?
So from a documentation standpoint, you have a spreadsheet that you're keeping all of this data in. Let's give everybody an inside look. If like, let's say they don't have this starting tomorrow or even this afternoon, if they're feeling really motivated after today, what would that process look like? What notes do you want everybody to have? What things do you guys notate, and what information do you gather? And then after that, I want to have you touch on like how often are you touching on and staying in contact with each one of these different levels?
Yeah, I mean, I would say first of all, if you're feeling froggy, call me. We can dive into it. I mean, I've got a ton of resources I can share, but you know, the big things is I've got two separate spreadsheets, right? Like I have my pillars, which is these are all existing relationships. And then I have a separate one, which, you know, my entire team uses, where when the first time you meet somebody, we've got things detailed out timeline by timeline when we follow up. So, you know, there's an initial meeting, there's a thank you that goes out, there's a 7-day, there's a 14 days later, there's another 28 days later. And all of those things have things where we, throughout that first conversation, hopefully figured out how do we add value, right? Like, what was your need? How do I make the introduction? How do I give you this piece of tech, whatever it is? So when I get out of a meeting, I just brain dump everything that was there, because ultimately, like, I'm going to lose it unless I put it somewhere. So we've got a living, breathing spreadsheet figuring out how do I add value to this. And I think that was something that, like, really, identified a flaw in me. And, if I can have some grace, I think probably something that we all struggle with is it's really easy when you're succeeding in your career to feel like you're the most important person in every relationship, right? You look at it as like, man, I'm crushing it. I'm doing great, whatever. But if you have that lens with people who can send you business, then you're going to miss out on a ton of stuff. And so that's where, like, I said it earlier, my view of myself is like this small piece of the thing, but my network is worth so much. So if I can make introductions to everybody surrounding me, to every client I have, now my value goes up because I've made all these introductions, right? So yeah, so I'm documenting value add stuff. And then for my pillars and influencers, I'm noting the last time we talked, what we talked about, if there's anything I see coming up that I can make an impact point. If I'm going to do a private client event, something like that, where I'm saying, hey, I'm going to take 6 or 8 people out to dinner. We may say, hey, well, let's bring somebody else that's just like you to this dinner. And I'm documenting, when was the last time I did that? Is there ever an opportunity to give them, we call it the perfect gift, right? Like, what's something where, I picked up, oh, you're a Chicago Bears fan, and it just so happens at the end of the year you got a card from me talking about something we talked about with a Bears jersey, right? So just, as you said before, just intentionality with each of those things.
I think one thing I could add to that too is, like, if you're thinking of, like, if you're sitting here thinking like, okay, I have to connect with 300 or 400 people and, like, try to remember all these small independent details like Rich is talking about, if you're intimidated by that concept, use technology to help with that. So I don't do this in my face-to-face coffee necessarily, but, like, if I ever have a buyer consultation with a new client that's looking for a mortgage, I'm using most of the time a virtual meeting for that, and I'm using the AI recap on that, and that takes notes for you. And I can tell you confidently, like, I'm not very good at mental notes on things like that, and more importantly, I don't want to be sitting there during the call, like, writing all this shit down, right? So I would tell you that, like, that's been a big game changer for me, is utilizing recordings of the calls that I'm having and then utilizing AI to recap those and take notes. And then you could use that and implement it into this, spreadsheet that he's talking about. So that's just a quick value add that I would add to that, that, I'm sure you probably don't do, but if that's something that you're feeling, you're like, man, how do I take mental note of all this stuff and all these people that I'm interacting with? That's a way you could help navigate that.
Yeah. And I recognize that in myself, and that's why I said, like, I get out of the meeting and I immediately brain dump it into something, because it's like goldfish memory. Like, 5 minutes after the meeting, it's gone. I can't really remember who I was with and what we talked about and whatever. But as soon as I dump it in somewhere, now I've got it. And, I think it means a lot more to somebody when they get a message following up going like, hey, man, something about your daughter, something about, like, this tech problem you had, whatever. And they go, holy crap, you were really listening to me. Because 99% of people have that same goldfish problem I have, and they forgot it all, right? So, and I can reference that before the next time we meet, whatever it is. So there are ways to protect your own flaws, right? But it takes some intentional work, and it is a skill. Like, it's not something that just happens overnight.
This episode is also sponsored by Amplified DSM, the production team behind the scenes of this podcast. From a professional audio quality to editing, distribution, and content strategy, Amplified DSM helps creators turn ideas into polished, consistent shows. They make podcasting approachable for business owners and professionals who want their voices heard without the technical headaches. If you've ever thought about launching a podcast or improving the one you already have, Amplified DSM helps provide structure and expertise to make it happen. I'd love to have you share. So we've identified all these different sections of and identified these different types of people that we're trying to identify. I'd love to have you touch on, if you were a real estate agent today, who are some examples of who you think would fit into each one of these categories?
Yeah, 100%. So, I mean, I think as far as pillars go, I mean, those are going to be the natural people you think of. You're going to have people who have bought homes with you. They have bought in the price range that is your ideal target. They are people that you really enjoyed working with, that you can continue to build a relationship with, and ultimately they will introduce you to other people. That's going to be your pillars. Influencers, this is where, if I was going to really challenge somebody, I would say you've got a lot more influencers surrounding you than you think you do. Your mortgage lenders, if they are treated the right way, if you handle introductions to them the right way, ultimately they can be a great source of leads for you. And when I say leads, I don't mean just buying leads for you. I mean making warm introductions that almost always close, right? So I think if anybody, I've given some, referral classes here before to real estate groups, and I'm going to go ahead and just give this example because I think it does a nice job of painting it, and most people agree when I talk through this. So on one side, I've got a real estate agent that does sells 100 houses a year, right? They're absolutely crushing it. On the other side, we've got one that sells 50. Now, the one on this side, they have been told since they've been in the industry that they need to send an email out and they need to make 3 introductions, right? Some brokerages have that rule, some don't say it. Legally, the thing we're trying to avoid is steering, right? But that's how they've decided to do it. They're busy. That's how it goes out. Of the list of 3, every time I take a poll of the crowd, we end up saying, yeah, maybe 10%, 20% end up within that list of 3 if that's the only way I do it, right? So of the 100, somewhere between 10 and 20 deals got referred out intentionally. Now this person over here, they got 50 deals. The second they go under contract, they go, hey, you have the option to work with whoever you want, but I sell 50 houses a year. I see these go really good. I see them go really bad. If you're open to it, I'm going to make an introduction to Brady.
Yes,
right?
Please.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I need like that. So of that, how many clients are going to say, no, I refuse to do that, right? And so now when an introduction is made that way, they already know you trust them as the professional. Now you're getting credit for that referral. And I don't know, I know for myself, when we track it, when we have a warm referral, we close 90% of them, right? So now you as somebody who does 50 deals a year gave 40 referrals. The guy who did twice as much business as you gave out 10 to 20 referrals. And the fact that it came over a warm text introduction, how much more valuable to that person, to that influencer in your life do you think you are? Right? So analyzing, can I give a good referral the same way I want to receive a good referral is a really good thing to think about. Because ultimately there's obviously a lot of money on the line, right? Like if you can pick up 3 or 4 deals from each of those people throughout the year, that's a lot of money in your pocket. So that was just one thing to think about as you do this. Like that's one piece of hygiene that I had to get good at. It was the same thing with roofing companies where I was just sending out people's numbers and saying, hey, give them a call, whatever. And then I would see them and, I'd dap my guys up and say, hey, I sent you a bunch of deals. And they'd go,
Haven't seen them.
Yeah, I never saw them. Right. But now every single client I challenge them, I go, you know what? We see 40 claims a year. I see contractors do a good job. I see them do a bad job. If you're open to it, I'll have you at least talk to my guy. If you have somebody you'd rather work with, that's totally fine. And guess who they use every single time? The little guy that was standing up here.
Still here. But I think that's something that, like, you taught me that in the first 2 weeks that I probably met you, and it completely changed my perspective of how to earn referrals. And I think that the important piece, and first and foremost, is this isn't just in relation to the real estate agent to lender referral basis. It goes across the board regardless of what sort of business you're referring. But when he told me to think of it backwards in the shift of how would I want my name to be received, like that completely changed my thought process. I don't want to send out 3 insurance agents because if I just send them 3 names and I don't know whether they called them or not, there's a chance they might close or they might not, right? And whereas on the flip side, if you start a group chat or tag them on an email, there's just a higher likelihood. And if I were the one receiving that, that's the way I would want to be done. And also from a follow-up standpoint, it's so much more effective to follow up when you've got 2 people following up rather than just one of them. And it's going to turn that, that process a little quicker.
Yeah, 100%.
It's stickier too. So,
and I think the thing to think about is like for myself, selfishly, I am like, I hope nobody else is referring our mutual clients to anybody because I want that credit, right? Like I talk about the real estate agent that I worked with in Omaha. The biggest value she ever added to me was her network. She introduced me to my contractors. She introduced me to my insurance person, financial advisor, all these different things. And I'll be honest, I remember literally nothing from our transactions. Like, I don't know that she knew a ton about houses. I don't know any of that stuff. Like it was pleasant. It was fine. But like where her value lied was she introduced me to her entire network. And now my life was substantially easier because of it. And so now, if I get involved in a deal and they don't have a financial advisor, they don't have contractors, they don't have commercial bankers, they don't have all these things, I will be the first one to insert myself and make sure they are using my connections because my value just went from here to here. Right? So that is a huge missed opportunity. And, James on my team, he just had a call with a guy who sells multi-million-dollar houses, and he was talking to him about the insurance on them. And his response was as well, I bet they all have people, right? And my response to James is like, man, what a missed opportunity for your ideal client to introduce them to other people who specialize in exactly what he does. So I think that's a mindset shift sometimes, because we are not taught that. When you're taught to go sell houses, when you're taught to go sell insurance, it's not about all these extracurriculars surrounding getting deals closed. But there's a massive upside in doing it.
Talk about your recommendation on if you ask if somebody needs some sort of service and they say they already have a person, regardless of the industry. We can use lending if it's easy for people to relate to that if you want. But if they already say they have their person, how would you recommend somebody handle that situation?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, when I'm in this place at this point, I go, you know what? I'm always looking for 10 out of 10s. If you think your person's a 10 out of 10, give me their contact because I want to meet with them. And the amount of 10 out of 10s that turn into like 2 out of 10s and they all of a sudden don't want me to meet with them changes pretty fast. For a while, we were doing that with every deal we closed. We'd say, hey, we want to make sure your network's a 10 out of 10, financial advisor, CPA, mortgage lender, real estate agent, da-da-da-da-da. And if you already have a 10 out of 10, that's great, but let me know because I want to meet them. If you don't, let me know because I'm going to make an introduction. And I think there's this default response to like, well, it's just easier because my dad knows some guy or whatever. But like when you really press on that a little bit more, a lot of times it turns out it was like your dad's college roommate and he does it part-time. So I think just asking some questions, right? Like, hey, if you got it.
Well, I think your heart behind that has to be twofold. One is it's like, yes, you want to make sure the process is going to go well, right? So that's why you're asking that question is you want to make sure the people they're working with are going to do a good job and make sure that they're taken care of on that front. The other side of it is like, well, I don't want you to just work with that person because you know who they are. Right. And I'm not, on the flip side, not saying that they're bad at what they do. You know, it may be an opportunity where, if they already rate them a 9 or a 10 out of 10, that's an opportunity then to grow these things that we're talking about that's on the back. It can be an additional person that you can add to your flywheel of pillars, you know, and I've had that exact experience. Like I have referrals that come through from a past client and, maybe they already have a real estate agent, right? And obviously selfishly, I'd love for them to work with one of my trusted partners that I already know, but I don't push it too far to the point where I'm scaring them away from working with that person because it could be an opportunity to grow your network too. And so it's a fine line there of making sure that they're taken care of and the person they're getting represented by is really good at what they do, but also using it as an opportunity to grow your network too. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, and all of this can't take away from the fact that at the end of the day, your business has to be dialed in, right? This whole flywheel doesn't work if your process sucks, so that's where diving into your industry specifically and making sure that client experience is a 10 out of 10 makes this flywheel work substantially faster is people have to walk away and go, holy shit, you're the best at what you do. Right. And that requires a ton of internal reflection and honestly relying on people in your network to judge the things that you're doing so you can make it better. Right. So just because you're getting good at this doesn't mean you have to stop obsessing over being the best at what you do. Right. So I don't want that to get lost in the weeds here. This is all awesome. But if you're struggling with your client experience or your process or how you actually do your job, that won't work. So
I think one of the big things that I think will be important to take home is, and everybody's going to handle this differently, but I think we're all guilty of being really hot and cold at doing a lot of this stuff, right? Sometimes we execute this, especially I feel like it's a first of the year, right? It's 2026. I'm going to knock it out of the park. I'm going to do everything perfectly. We go out and we do this really well. We schedule all these meetings. We start taking these notes. And then 2 or 3 months later, you're like, okay, well now I'm busy or, the weather's nice. I want to play some golf, whatever your excuse may be. We're going to have these ebbs and flows in hot and cold seasons. What would be your recommendation on how to navigate through that? And another thing that I'd love to, and this could be a whole different, honestly, part of this conversation, but when you scheduled all these meetings, I know firsthand you got really busy, very busy. So I'd love to have you touch on after the hot and cold piece, how do you handle the quick instant growth and managing that while not sacrificing the service piece that is your insurance?
Yep, 100%. So the hot and cold thing, I unfortunately don't think there's a nice answer for you. I think it's going to boil down to discipline and you making that decision every day, right? There's nobody that can fix that for you. There is nobody that can do that for you. We can guide you, support you. My team knows this all the time. I say like, look, I'll give you all the resources in the world, but at the end of the day, like executing it is your choice. And I can't force you to go to the gym. I can't force you to eat right. I can't force you to pick up the phone and make calls, but that part is on you. And honestly, a coach has been great for me in that aspect too, because there are times when you get down, you get beat up, you don't think it's going right, but sometimes you just have to have somebody there to, steer the ship back in the way it goes. And that can be your spouse, that can be your friends. There's a lot of ways with that. And the second part.
So once you implemented this, right, you filled your cup with a bunch of these meetings, your business exponentially growth, right? And that's our hope, is that you guys can all implement these things as well and see some growth, start scheduling more meetings, more coffees being intentional with this, tracking these systems. When they get to the point where the business is increased, how did you handle that? And I can remember very vividly a conversation that you and I had, where I had to candidly tell you, like, Rich, I'm seeing a drop in your response rate and the execution of the insurance piece. So how did you handle that growth and making sure you dialed back in the execution?
Yeah. I mean, that was the exact stage I talk about when I was kind of flying by the seat of my pants, where every day was just kind of what the day was, and felt like we were winning, felt like we were getting the job done, whatever. But when I started looking at it from like, hey, next year I want to do double what I did, to like, hey, next year I want to do 10 times as much as I did this year, then I said, okay, like, I can't just fly by the seat of my pants anymore. I got to have a plan, right? So now every day is structured, right? Like, I'm at the gym at the same time every day. I am eating lunch every time at the same day. Like, my mornings are cut out for my pillars for a couple hours. Like, I am quoting for a couple hours. I am prospecting at other times. So it's like, there's no surprise when I walk into a day. So now I'm no longer reactive, I'm proactive. My day ends every day with 15 minutes of me putting down exactly what I'm going to do the next day in what order. Obviously that's not perfect, it changes, but I had to change my mentality around that, where I wasn't just guessing on what I was going to get done. I was making a deal with myself every evening on what was going to be done before the next day. And then, you could have a whole podcast on it, but implementing technology, systems, AI, all of that stuff has allowed me to scale faster and, more profitably. But, that conversation for another day.
I love it. I keep staring at this piece of paper to try to figure out what we should talk about next. Do you have anything else?
Yeah. So I think one thing worth hitting on is, so in all of your folders, you're going to have a couple documents from me. You're going to have one from Brady. Brady can talk about his, but the 2 white pieces of paper, these are things that I put my entire team through every year. And I think as people who are looking to excel in our businesses, one of the hardest questions we'll ever be asked is, what do you want? Right? And it's, when I get asked that, I go, man, I don't know. Right? Like, be successful, right? Is that money? Is that family? Is that time? Is that whatever it is? And the one that's titled 10 goals, what that's going to have you do is it's going to have you go through the 10 most important goals in your life. Health, wealth, family, you name it, put it in there. It doesn't all have to be based on business. But when you do this, I would encourage you, shut your phone off, listen to something calm, and just think, because we never take the time to do it. Our team shut down our office for an entire day and worked through this together. So that's the purpose of the first one. It's just, I want you to identify in your life, what are the most important goals. Second worksheet, that's going to have you dive into, okay, you got these 10 goals. If there was one goal within this entire thing that you achieved, which one would make the biggest difference in your life in achieving the rest of these, right? Which is kind of a challenging thing. But where I think it gets really good then is, like, now you've identified the most important goal you have for the next year. Now it's going to have you list out 10 things that it would take to accomplish to get to that goal, and you're going to put deadlines on them. And you need to share this with somebody, by the way. If it's just a deal with yourself, most people are not going to do it. But if you're on a team, whatever, share with somebody else, hey, I've got these 10 things I need to get done to hit this goal, and here's the dates I'm going to have them done by. Now you've got accountability. Also, a benefit of coaching is now I've got somebody every week on my ass if I'm not doing what I'm saying doing, right? So that can be done internally within your team. It can be with friends. It can be with family, spouse, whatever it is. But I would strongly recommend going through this, because it'll actually give you some direction. And I think it's important that these goals aren't always all business, because all these other areas of your life are going to influence how you can excel in business. So I just wanted to make sure everybody kind of had an understanding of it. There's one other piece within it in the first worksheet, and I'm going to spoil the surprise on it, but it's a good thing to talk about. So it's going to ask some questions around, what would you do if you found out you had 6 months to live? It's going to ask, what would you do if you won $50 million? And there's one more in there. And go through these, think about them. But at the end of the day, the moral of that story is why wait, right? You don't know if you have 6 months. The lottery's probably never going to come and happen. So, the world is yours, but you got to go and take it, right? And that's kind of the mindset you want to be in when you set these goals and work through this. But like I said, I know a lot of these are going to end up in the trash, but if they don't and you work through them, I would love to hear kind of how you do it. I'm a nerd about this stuff. I love to see people succeed. And, if my team can help support you in that and, making a change, then we'd love to do it. So
today's episode is brought to you by Key Closing Services. A smooth closing can make or break the final experience in a real estate transaction. And their team is known for precision, communication, and reliability. They work closely with the lenders, agents, buyers, and sellers to ensure every detail is handled accurately and on time. The result of a closing process that feels organized, calm, and predictable. If you're looking for a title and closing partner that values professionalism and execution, Key Closing Services is a trusted name in the industry. I would say this is as good a time as ever to start opening up the opportunity. If anybody has questions, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I also don't want to sit here quietly and not have anybody ask questions too. So, Laura, if we can grab that mic and just do a very casual hand raise if anybody has any questions for Rich or myself. My pamphlet, I'll touch on that briefly in the folder, is actually not pillar related. It's more a mortgage specific document, which will be a benefit to you guys and your clients. But it's a book pamphlet guidebook that I wrote a couple of weeks ago at my 10-year anniversary. I was just doing a self-reflection of the last 10 years of being a mortgage lender and some take homes that I've learned and want to pass along to you as well. So that's what that is. But anybody want to start off? Any interactive questions we can ask? Louie's got one.
Rich, you didn't touch on this, but I know part of your growth, you hired an assistant, and that's helped substantially. How did you go through that process, and how did you know that person was the right fit to help you grow?
Yeah, like I said, I had reached this point where the pot was boiling over, and another thing I'll touch on within this that I think is a really healthy thing to do is, we probably all have like a dollar amount in our head that we think our time is worth per hour. If you were to analyze everything you're doing in a day and look at, would it be worth me paying somebody my own dollars per hour to do that task? If the answer is no, then you probably shouldn't be doing it, right? And I had reached that point where I was doing so many mundane tasks that just ate up my time and weren't moving the needle for me that I knew I had to hire somebody. But I was super spoiled in the hiring process. It was literally the first person I interviewed, and she's a rock star. So shout out Michaela. But I knew I needed somebody that was tech forward. I knew I needed somebody that was detail oriented. Those that know me probably know I'm like a pie in the sky guy. Like, I think anything can happen and it'll all work out and we'll just go after it and see what happens. And so I needed somebody on the back end who could like pick up the pieces and make sure it all actually functions the way I dream it's going to work. And so I think knowing kind of your shortcomings is a good thing when you hire that person, so they can steer you in the right direction.
Question for you, Rich. So we've had this conversation about setting goals and the $50 million, situation. When you're setting goals, like, how do you evaluate your goals to a point where you're not setting them too high, where you're like getting that paralysis, keeping them realistic, but also achievable at the same time? Yeah, for sure.
It's such an interesting thing because it depends on the person, right? Like, when I go through this, there are sometimes people who lowball themselves so far where it's like, you could barely try and you'll hit your goal, right? And there are other ones where it's like, that would be a world record if you did it, So I think the reality is it depends on the person. But anytime you're setting a goal for yourself, it's got to feel uncomfortable. Like, if you don't have a little bit of doubt tied to it, it's probably not a big enough goal. And then one thing, our team talked about is, if a goal doesn't require you to change a behavior, it's probably not a good goal. Right? Because if you just keep doing the exact same stuff, you're going to keep getting the exact same results, and anything that's above what you're getting today is just a result of luck or a market or whatever, not something you controlled. So I think I'd look through it through that lens. If it's something that makes you feel a little bit scared, uncomfortable, whatever it is, and it requires that you change a behavior to hit it, it's probably a good goal.
Rich, you look really cute today, by the way. I just wanted to let you know.
Finally.
What about me, Bobby?
You leave my boy out?
You look like Brady. But Rich, you're obviously very successful at what you do. How do you stay grounded and as humble as you are?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was the thing I talked about is like, and I genuinely believe this through and through, is my network is substantially more valuable than me. I'm just the piece that gets this done and connects people, right? And, I think we all got to remember where we came from, right? I think I saw this a ton when I was in medical device sales. Somebody would come out of college and all of a sudden, 5 years later, they're making $400,000 or $500,000, and money makes you feel like a big dog, right? But the reality is like money isn't the thing that people are going to remember when you leave. And I think walking into every relationship, or, we all have it, right? We all have other industries that are calling on us and they want our business and whatever. Remember there was a point in time that you were that guy, right? You were door knocking or doing open houses just to hope that you could meet somebody, right? So I think just keeping perspective it's such a crucial thing. And what that doesn't mean is you have to give your time away. But what it does mean is I think you handle all those situations with grace and respect. And ultimately that comes back to you when you handle it that way. So.
So you guys talked a little bit about some of your ideal clients. Since there's a lot of real estate agents here, and since I'm one, I'd like to hear from you, what does that ideal client look like as a real estate agent that you'd like to work with? And you also talked about how to make yourself stand out and be different. What are some things that you've seen in real estate agents that have stood out to you that we could take away too?
Yeah, for sure. So, ideal client's really that's going to be up to the person, right? Selfishly, I would say if I was a real estate agent, all my clients would want to buy $1 billion houses, right? But that's not going to be everybody's thing, right? So I think just identifying hey, maybe I'm the guy who sells $100,000, $200,000 houses a year, and I know that market inside and out, and I know when I walk through a house how to identify all the repairs that are needed, and I know about plumbing and soffit and fascia and peeling roofs and siding and all that stuff, right? But I want to know going into it that I'm not trying to market to $1 million houses, and then the next day I'm trying to market to $200,000 houses because, if at the end of the day your business is for anybody, it's for nobody, right? So you need to have some direction on who you're talking to, right? Everybody in here is probably using social media at this point. The biggest thing I've had to challenge myself was who am I talking to? Right? I was just doing shit because I thought it was funny for a while. But then all of a sudden I was like, okay, well, I would love if people called me about insurance if I posted this little funny thing. And then I realized man, if somebody's buying insurance off of Facebook, they're probably not my ideal client, right? So now my marketing shifted and now it's targeted towards referral partners and the influencers in my life, stuff like that. So that would be the kind of the lens I'd look through. That is just, who do you vibe with, right? Because you have to like them, right? They have to listen to you. So that would be that part. And then remind me the second part of your question.
What have you seen in real estate agents that have stood out to you?
Yeah, for sure. Yep. 100%. So I think for me, process is a big thing, right? Network is another huge thing where, like I said, my realtor, it was amazing for me where not only did she just know a contractor, it wasn't like she pulled them off of Google. She's like, no, I know the owner. I know exactly how they operate. This is their process, right? The other thing I think is really important, especially if you work with anybody who works as an investor, is make sure you spend some time learning a little bit about construction, right? Because I've walked properties with real estate agents that have no clue what they're looking at. And I've walked them with people who are like, hey, yeah, that's galvanized plumbing. That could be a big problem. So, whether it's taking a roofing guy or a plumber or whatever it is to coffee and just learning the basics enough so when you walk a property, you can add value in that way, I think that's huge. And I think these things are the basics now, but I think having a CRM, intentional follow-up, I spend a lot of time, if I'm going to send a referral, I look at the way they've interacted with me over time. I look at how they treat their lenders. I look at how they treat these other people in their network, because ultimately I think that's a reflection on how they'll ultimately treat my client if I'm going to send them over. And so if it's that person that never responds to a text unless there's something in it for them, those are the things I'm paying attention to, and you should know that everybody else in your world is too. So yeah, I think hopefully that answers it. Yeah.
I'll add two quick things as well. Two things that I would always look for is, one, somebody who is willing to let me execute my process that I've built. So often I get a opportunity to represent or work with a client and they just want a quick rate and a quick pre-approval. And the process that we built is deeper than that. We have to understand what they're looking for, what their goals are, what they're trying to accomplish. So that what I would tell you is like first thing that I'm always looking for is somebody who's willing to let us take them through the process that we built because it's a proven system that works. And the second thing on that front is somebody who is willing to sing our praises as well. I think that goes a long ways for us is like, we are stronger as a team, you know, and that goes in this entire web that's on the back of this is like, if we can grow this thing together, it is so much better. And how many more 5-star reviews are we willing to get? And how many more 5-star reviews are our clients willing to leave when all of us execute at a high level rather than just all of us kind of piecing it together? So that's kind of the two additional things that I would add to that.
Yeah, great.
John? No, you don't. Well, you might for the video. Sorry. Please do.
Yes.
24 years in real estate lending and incredible content today. What I love when I'm watching a podcast or something like this is I want to walk out feeling almost stupid and embarrassed of like, I think I'm successful and how did I miss on some of these things? And that's how I feel right now, which to me is incredible because it's growth. So the 10 of 10 conversation of you're looking for people, I'm trying to figure out where I'm going to implement that into my system because if I don't and don't do it consistently, it's not going to happen. When would you advise to do that? Would you advise doing it during the process or I do a lot of stuff post-closing. I do a post-closing call. Would that be a good time to have that conversation? Because I need to get that started like tomorrow.
Yeah. So I would say like there are things in your deal, obviously, that you need to have executed on, right? So like if you're making an intentional referral for insurance, like that piece can happen then,
Yeah,
but you're not.
Those ones are taken care of. The insurance agents, the
like
realtors.
that stuff you needs to happen. But I think it's all post closing,
Okay.
And that's something that can be automated really easy, right? So you're going to look at, you know, obviously there's probably some sort of ask for a Google review for introductions to people, whatever it is. And I think if you can have a timed out email coming after that and go, hey, you know, this was awesome. Congrats on your purchase. It's obviously a huge decision. There's some other really important people you need to have in your life moving forward. We want to know if they're 10 out of 10s. Here's the list. Send me your response either way.
So my post-closing phone call right now is in between 7 and 15 minutes. You wouldn't advise adding it to the post-closing phone call. You would advise implementing something afterwards, a video from a scalability standpoint.
That's a 2-minute conversation at the end of the day. Okay. So if you're doing a phone call, you might as well knock it out while you're on there. For myself, it was one of those things where I think that same box got checked by just having it as an automation that goes out. And one more touch point, right? So like, well, that's one thing we monitor is like how many times throughout a year are we touching base with a client? So it could just create one more time where something goes out and be like, hey, just checking in. This is one more important thing. And if you had, if you had a recorded video, it could still be like a face that goes with it. But I don't know. If I were you, I'd try them both.
Cool.
One other quick thing I'll add too, John. Prior to buyer's consultation, I have a form that I send to my people that asks them a list of questions to identify their goals. And one of the questions on there is, do you have a real estate agent? Do you have a financial advisor? Do you have an insurance agent? And please rank them 10 out of 10 on that level. And it's a quick, simple form to implement on that too. So if you don't do that already, you could add it there also.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And those easier ones I'm more used to, but I'm starting to think about like the needs that our customers have and how hard it is to get good help. So I mean, a landscaper, somebody needs to do odd jobs around the house. Like if you have those things, again, I love it because I feel like, holy shit, how have I missed this in my 23 years? And I have. It's how big can you get that sphere and how, again, do you execute it consistently to provide that value? Because you're correct. When I refer somebody to a contractor that finishes somebody's basement, they do a great job, there's a huge value in me for that because they execute the way that I want to. When I refer it off to a great realtor and they kill it, there's a huge value there. My job is easier because they do a great job and the customer loves the agent, so they feel the overall experience is better. But how do I grow on that to different areas? That's where my head's going right now. Well,
yeah, and that's where I say, like, we're all trained to fish these same ponds, right? And I think I've shared with John before, like, one of my best referral partners is an owner of a manufacturing company. Not something they train you when you start insurance to go after, but this is a person who has exposure to a ton of people, both his employees, both his other business owner friends, whatever it is. And he's somebody who I've been super intentional about trying to find ways to add value, right? Like whether that's on the insurance side or just professionally or whatever it is. And so, for you, John, right? Landscaper is a great one, right? If you find a guy who owns a landscaping company and has 50 employees, and now all of a sudden you guys have this program that can partner up with other companies and you're consistently sending them intentional referrals, like now you've got an influencer that nobody else in mortgage has. And there's a ton of that can be had for each of you guys because your clients have a ton of needs that you're probably not even talking about.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anybody else? James has one back there.
Rich, we've talked so much about process, and for the realtors who have not worked with you, can you kind of walk us through your process and what makes us different than just getting a piece of paper and having our client just, okay, this is what I got for my premium, and go from there?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, I think these are things that ultimately like you guys can apply to your business too, because I've taken them from people in this room's businesses to help develop mine. But one thing I realized coming into insurance is nobody knows anything about it. And at the time, that also included myself. During my interviews, they asked who my insurance was for, flip houses and for my regular house, my cars, and I had no clue. And then I also, once I learned what I was doing, realized I had horrible coverage on it, and I just went with what was cheap, right? But like no one ever told me. They just sent me a quote, and I said, okay, I trust you, you're a professional, whatever. So now for us, kind of obsessing over this process, we now have a lot of things that are digital to make it easy, where we can text them a link. They can then fill in all their personal information securely. That stuff also will download copies of their current insurance information if it's, if they're going to bundle something with it, whatever. At that point, that is then all automatically processed, passed off to another team. They run quotes. They send it off to all the different companies. That kicks out to us. We have quotes. And then what I think is the most important part of the entire thing is both the presentation and then what happens after close. So like I said, presentation wise, most people are used to consuming insurance by receiving a document in their inbox, and it all looks like Chinese to them until they get to the bottom, and then they recognize one thing and they know what it costs. But what they don't recognize is what that can cost them long term because of all the other stuff that's hidden in there, right? So we send out a video with every single quote, their personalized quote, walk them through every line of what it means, what it costs, what their options are, how it would perform in a claim, stuff like that, to truly let them walk away understanding what they're getting, and then having the autonomy to choose, like, hey, I want to take on a little more risk, I want to take off risk, things like that. So that was a huge step forward for us. And then long term, we have automations to help track things like premium and stuff like that. I'm sure a ton of you guys over the last 3 years have gotten calls from past clients going, hey, what do I do? My rates jumped up. It's gotten crazy in Iowa, right? And that's because of the old school way to do insurance was just wait till somebody calls you pissed off and then try to fix it. Right? So for us, we pay for a system that monitors people's prices over time. We can set thresholds and say, hey, if it changes by more than a certain percentage, we're going to know a month before it happens. And then you're going to get another video from us giving you a heads up. Hey, this was coming, but we recommend to either move you here or this is still the best option for you, but plan to adjust your budget. Right? So that's that hygiene side of things where, we want to make sure that if you send us somebody that you feel like they come back to you and go, whoa, that was totally different than anything we've gone through. We're excited about it, whatever. And that makes that whole flywheel a lot easier. So.
Anyone else?
Yeah, so I can vouch for Rich. We just started working together, I want to say like 6 months to a year ago, right? And that process, man, is amazing. I didn't even know what my last insurance guy was doing. Like you said, he just sent me the docs, and I'm like, cool, am I covered? And I just trust him, right? And you send me the breakdown, and you go over everything, and we take some things off that maybe we don't need, or dumb it down a little bit to fit my needs or the pricing that I essentially want. But you're real with me and you tell me, dude, you need that, like, don't skimp on it. Okay, so I love that about you. But then the other thing is for coaching, how long have you been doing it? And measure, like, if you can disclose, like, obviously you track things, how much have you seen in growth with that coach?
Yeah, so I've been with a coach for about a year and a half. And from a growth perspective, it's been interesting. Obviously, I opened my own firm about 6 months ago, so that, like, was a change in things. But if one of the metrics I look at is just what are we doing monthly in premium, and I'll tell you, since over the last 6 months, they have all been record-setting months for myself. And that's largely due to, that coaching process and, speaking to her question, like identifying who my ideal clients are, right? He hit me on the nose right in the beginning where he said, okay, tell me who your ideal client is. And I kind of fumbled over like, oh, anybody with a pulse. And then when I really dove into it, I told him, and he said, okay, like what % of your marketing goes towards that exact person? And the answer was like 0. Right. So like, I think the people who have been along with me in this journey have seen probably my outward facing social media, the way I talk, the way I move, the way I do business has changed a ton in the last 3 years. And I think that's largely due to that immediate shift that happened. But, I think the question that's probably underlying within that is like, was it worth it? Did it pay for itself? Right. And the answer is yeah, really fast. But that was also a decision. Like if you're going to do it, you got to buy into it. Right. And shameless plug for him, like if that's something that's on your mind and, you're not thinking, hey, I want an industry specific coach, I want a different coach, shoot me a text. I'd be happy to do it. It's a no pressure call. I mean, when I left it, he was like, dude, you can do whatever you want. I don't care. Right. Like you gotta be ready to take a jump if you're going to do it. But, if you want to talk through and go deeper on like what that's looked like for me, then I'm happy to talk to any of you.
Any final questions? One more here. Shout out Laura, by the way. Thanks for running that around for us.
I'm just curious if you had one thing that you did personally and one thing that you did from like an outsourcing perspective to gain new clients or convert people that you've engaged with, what are those things and how much has that impacted your business? And then also, Rich, I want to know why you named it Avanti Group. Just curious.
Yeah. So the one, I would say if I had to pick one thing, the one thing that I did, I feel like that made the biggest difference was everything became a system, right? I think like probably everybody in this room would consider yourself like pretty social. People like you can build relationships, but like that is not scalable in a massive way. And so I had to revert to like, hey, there's things on my calendar with specific people to talk about specific things over specific times throughout the year. And so like implementing these spreadsheets where it was like, no, I'm not going to lose track of all the most important people, because like who are the first people when you get to the end of the year and you go, man, I was a bad friend. And that's my best friend. I just didn't find time to call him. But that's what happens is you get caught up in hard deals and then you end up spending all your time and energy on these hard deals that realistically aren't your ideal people. So I think creating a system in that arena, but honestly in everything in my business, it all had to be a system or it's going to fall apart. So that was that. And then the Avanti Group, I wanted it to sound like a premium luxury brand. I didn't want insurance to be in it because I think insurance agents have a bad reputation, but 2, I don't think we operate like normal insurance agents. I feel like I'm more of like a risk advisor, both for our commercial and our personal clients. So I felt like Avanti Group, it cut out the insurance piece of it. But then also it was Latin for let's go or like move forward. And then at that time for myself, like taking that leap was a huge jump. And, I just kind of spoke to everything that I'm about, like continuing to move forward and stuff like that.
Anybody else? Feel good? No pressure if we don't have to. I just want to kind of take an opportunity to wrap things up a little bit and kind of bring everything full circle. For starters, I want to give a big shout out to Rich. He's been a big motivator for me. And frankly, the coolest part is that it has been from an approach of not trying to earn my business. It's a genuine friendship, and I can feel that. So thank you for what you've done to me. Thank you for being a resource for everybody that's here today. I feel like you've been an incredible value. And I want to kind of do a subtle plug, and I feel like I would be not giving myself enough justice without it, but that's what I feel this podcast can really turn into, is an opportunity to highlight really, really cool people. And that's what my hope is today, is that you guys feel encouraged and motivated after listening to the things that Rich says. And on the flip side of that, selfishly, I want to do that for all of you guys too. So obviously, yes, at the end of the day, my bills are paid because I do loans for people, right? And I want to earn your opportunity to represent your clients from a mortgage standpoint. But with this podcast, this really can be your guys' platform that I'm going to host and mediate and really give you guys an opportunity to highlight yourselves and the awesome businesses you've built. Because it's a super casual, informal way that we just have a conversation and highlight the great things that you guys are doing for your people already. So if after listening to today's episode and you have the inclination or the feeling that you want to be featured on an episode, we've got tons of openings heading into 2026. A simple text, DM, email to myself. I'd love to feature you guys, and we can get that on the books. I usually film 2 episodes every other Tuesday, and new episodes are released every week. So I feel like I want to kind of plug that as well. And it's a big testament to you guys, like I said at the beginning of this. But the fact that you guys are all here is a different step that you took than your peers today. You came out here to try to improve yourselves, and we hope that you feel that after listening to the things that Rich and I shared. And yeah, just if you ever need anything at all, mortgage, insurance, podcast, advice, friendship, we hope that you feel confident and comfortable to reach out to us. So thank you again, everybody, for coming out. Thanks again, Rich. This has been another episode of Educating Homebuyers, and we'll see you guys next time.